It's fast, it's informative, and it's to the point. So if you missed the news this week, welcome to Week in One, your quick fix of the top news stories and interviews featured on eNCA in the past 7 days. I'm Shritika Pillay. Let's bring you up to speed. The State of the Nation address took centre stage this week, and all eyes and ears were on President Cyril Ramaphosa as many hoped for solutions to the country's crises. The death toll in the Turkey-Syria earthquakes tops 17,000, while Gift of the Givers dispatches teams to provide relief. Teaching has resumed at Gelukdal Secondary School in Brakpan after several days of protests following the killing of an 18-year-old pupil last week. The news spotlight this week was focused on President Cyril Ramaphosa as he delivered his State of the Nation address. Our news teams were dispatched en masse to Cape Town City Hall. We caught up with eNCA anchor Dan Moyane and managing editor John Bailey during their road trip. They touched base with South Africans about what their expectations were ahead of the president's address.
This is day 2 of our road to Sona 2023 here on eNCA. Along the route so far, up to here where we are in the Karoo, we've been talking to ordinary South Africans. Two big issues were common. Everybody talks about the energy crisis, blackouts, and the impact on the lives.
Please, Mr. President Cyril Ramaphosa, fix the electricity.
We have a problem here in Colesberg. We are struggling with the load shedding.
Please sort out the electricity problem, sort out the infrastructure problems in our towns.
The second one is unemployment, especially for young people. Yes, there are other problems that we mentioned, like crime, the lack of economic growth. But those two, the issue of the energy crisis and the issue of youth unemployment, the rate of unemployment in the country is bothering many people who want job creation.
I want my president to give the youth a job.
Unemployment is really a problem in South Africa, so I hope he tackles that and permanent jobs.
We just need to make sure that jobs are created for our young people.
Eskom's woes forced President Cyril Ramaphosa to dedicate a decent chunk of his State of the Nation address to the struggling power utility yet again. The president gave a progress report on a number of unkept promises related to Eskom. These include the unbundling of the utility and, most importantly, its failure to keep the lights on. eNCA senior reporter Siphamandla Goge reports.
Eskom, Eskom and Eskom. That's what's set to take center stage during President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address this Thursday. The power utility continues to be a headache for President Ramaphosa's administration.
Due to our aging power stations, poor maintenance, policy missteps, and the ruinous effects of state capture, our country has a shortfall of around 4,000 megawatts of electricity.
The president will have to update the nation on what seems to be failures to meet the commitment to unbundle Eskom by the end of last year.
The utility has continued with its intensive maintenance program to reverse many years of neglected maintenance and underperformance of existing plants.
And whatever plans to save the power utility are announced, South Africans will pay more attention to the implementation aspect of those promises. Siphamandla Goge, Johannesburg.
Various organizations and academics say they're against the idea of President Cyril Ramaphosa implementing a state of disaster to deal with the electricity crisis. The groups say the additional power government will wield will enable widespread corruption, as seen during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. eNCA reporter Puleli Chwiti-Jones has the details.
It's no secret that the country is struggling to escape the persisting energy crisis. And while this is the case, the ANC's National Executive Committee has proposed to President Cyril Ramaphosa to declare a national state of disaster on the continuous rolling blackouts. However, the idea has been met with rage from experts who believe the move won't yield any results.
I do think that you can fix the regulatory environment, the political will. What will a declaration of a state of disaster change if you have a minister that has been sitting on IPPs for a very long time, that refuses to open up the grid for other independent power producers?
One academic says the political leadership that's needed to seriously drive and resolve the energy crisis without imposing a national state of disaster is missing in action.
Why do we have an executive? Where is the president? What is the president doing about the Eskom problems? For many, many years he's been there. He should really by now be understanding the problems of energy that we are facing.
Meanwhile, the agriculture sector says the energy crisis needs to be resolved before food scarcity spirals out of control.
There's no reason for a state of disaster at this point in time. Eskom must be empowered, a conducive policy environment must be created for Eskom to do his work, and then priority should be given to the agriculture sector.
But all these concerns may only be answered when the President delivers his State of the Nation address. Pule Ichiti Jones in Pretoria.
Let's recap on the highlights of how proceedings transpired at the State of the Nation address on Thursday.
Honourable members, I'm not going to allow it. I now suspend the proceedings. I now suspend the proceedings.
I will appoint a Minister of Electricity in the Presidency to assume full responsibility for overseeing all aspects of the electricity crisis response. You better listen, including the work of the National Energy Crisis Committee. Now, the Minister will focus full-time on the work with the Eskom board and the management on ending load shedding and ensuring that the Energy Action Plan is implemented without delay. To address the challenge of youth unemployment, the Employment Tax Initiative has been expanded to encourage businesses to hire more young people in large numbers. Now, this is a scheme that is underwritten by government.
Stay tuned to Week in One. Coming up, we look at some of the big interviews that our anchors did, as well as reaction to the State of the Nation address. Welcome back to Week in One. I'm Shirdika Pillay. After the much-anticipated State of the Nation address by President Cyril Ramaphosa this week, our anchors and reporters got immediate reaction from MPs of various political parties.
What a waste of money and a waste of time and everything.
Some of the measures indicated by the President is what Eskom should be doing and what Eskom and government should have been doing in the first place.
I also think it's a terrible idea to layer another minister on top of the energy crisis. You've already got two ministers who haven't got it right and who frankly have stood in the way of us being able to have energy security. You're now adding a third cook into the batch, around this terrible pot that is Eskom.
He is appointing a minister to focus on the project of getting Eskom right. And give that project man leader the capacity and the authority of a minister. So to me, I think there's nothing wrong with that.
There was a threat there of the head of state, thing that has never happened, that people they charge towards him where he's standing, as the police who have to really act.
I now suspend the proceedings.
We had to act. It's unfortunate that it happened, but I'm very sure that is correct, and the police had no other way of responding. If they hadn't responded that way, that have been the declaration of duty from their side.
News that the ANC-NEC wants government to declare a national state of disaster to address the energy crisis has been met with extreme skepticism and even outrage. However, columnist and author Bekisisa Mcube argues that a state of disaster would enable government to act more efficiently. eNCA's Tumelo Mototwane spoke to him for more perspective.
But you say it is actually the way to go. Why so?
Well, Eskom has two problems. One is a money problem, they've been loss-making for many years, and they have debt that close to 400 billion. And the second problem, of course, is an engineering problem. During the Zuma years, Eskom employed an extra 10,000 people. No one in South Africa knows what those people do. So Eskom requires money in the short term, as in tomorrow, and it requires to enlist skills that shouldn't by nature be a permanent appointment. So these are the people who should come to work as Eskom to solve a crisis. So what you do then, you declare a localized state of disaster, which will allow the president to withhold money that is sent to municipalities because they don't pay that money to Eskom. So before the grants are sent to municipalities, whatever is the estimate of what was owed to Eskom and what will be used for the following year, all that money, because we are in a state of disaster, is then taken and used to prop up Eskom and solve a crisis that is bigger than just COVID-19, because this threatens the livelihoods of everybody. Big business, small business, people, everyone is affected. And if the president does not act, he faces a nationwide unrest, something worse than the Zuma unrest of 2021.
When you talk about the unrest, you remind me of also a point that you highlighted, the 18.6% NERSA tariff increase. It seems like you're against it, and you're saying, besides your already tight beer budget being affected, you also talk about how it's the ordinary South African that is further put under strain. You're talking about the poor South Africans, those living below the poverty line, and you're saying that will result in a nationwide shutdown, unrest, worse, as you mentioned, than the July unrest.
It will be. It will be because I'm part of the middle class, right? And but every July, you suddenly realize that you're earning less than you did last year.
Yeah.
And you sort of don't understand what have you done because you were not spending like a drunken sailor. Then you remember is the electricity tariffs that are kicking in, you know, from our local municipalities, which we know they are already dysfunctional. You know, one of the reasons I decided to come to the studio was that there was no possibility that I would have electricity in the morning because there was a breakdown, there was something that was happening. So you have load shedding and then we have localized problems. And we just cannot run a household. How on earth can you run a business, let alone government?
Gender-based violence continues to plague institutions of higher learning in the country. Ntokozo Traba was found with multiple stab wounds at her off-campus residence in Pretoria last week, and her ex-boyfriend has been arrested. eNCA anchor Baron Hafke spoke to Pelisa Nkomo from the Commission for Gender Equality about what they believe needs to be done to curb this pandemic.
Now, I know that you have reached out to the universities, to TATS management, and have you been able to get hold of them, and what have they to say about this situation?
We've not been able to get a response yet in relation to the TUT, but and we're hoping that they will really be coming back to us fairly soon. But for us, one of the key things that is a concern and is the fact that we actually undertook a research last year that really looked at whether the institutions of higher learning are actually geared towards dealing with gender-based violence if cases of gender-based violence emerges. And our report concludes that not all institutions are not ready, in fact, to integrate women to be part of decision-making within the management of universities. But in fact, there are actually no policies, no instruments that are in place that are meant to deal with gender-based violence. And for us, that's a really, really, a concern. So I do think that, and it's something that we felt that we needed to not only shine a spotlight, but in fact, our intention is to really organize get the institutions of higher learning into the room, again, refresh their memory about our report, but also at the same time, actually compel them to make public commitment with regards to dealing with gender-based violence within their own institutions.
Now, like you said, you've had so many recommendations that you've made to these institutions, but of course you've also engaged the Department of Higher Learning and Education. Now, what do they have to say about these recommendations that you have made?
The minister, in fact, actually, after receiving our report, the minister is really acted in as far as setting up a committee that is meant to deal with gender-based violence. We still have to see the work that that committee has actually undertaken. In fact, the institutions unto which specifically that we undertook, an investigation regarding the gender-based violence framework or policies that exist actually have not really implemented anything. In their response to us when we inquired last year, they actually indicated that the COVID pandemic had inhibited them implementing any of our recommendation, which was for us a little bit of a surprise, because we're of the view that the basic issues that they need to establish, firstly, a policy framework that ensures that it does not only center women around gender-based violence, but also look at the existing infrastructure to support, women who are exposed to gender-based violence, and including institutional configuration in as far as infrastructure. So, we do think that there is really, really something that needs to be done with this matter. And I think the death of Ms. Kaba is just one too many. And we know that in the last decade, in fact, we've really, really been raising the issue of gender-based violence. But also fundamentally, what also shines the spotlight on this issue is that not only institutions don't have policy framework, but conversations about gender-based violence has not really started.
Stay tuned to Week in One. Coming up, aid organization Gift of the Givers dispatches teams to Turkey and Syria. The death toll from the earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria on Monday has risen to over 17,000 and is expected to rise. More than 42,000 others have been injured and 8,000 have been rescued from the debris. The race to find survivors has been sped up with our very own humanitarian group, Gift of the Givers, lending assistance. Senior reporter Desin Tatia joins the team in Turkey with their rescue efforts.
What you're seeing now is the traffic that is heading in the direction of Hatay. That's where we are going with the Gift of the Givers team, because we're making our way to the southern part of the country. That is where the disaster zone is. That is where the base has been set up by AFAD, which is the disaster management agency, which is responsible for preventing and dealing with disasters such as the earthquakes. This is a road or route that was closed, and now is the time when there are many of these vehicles that are making their way in the same direction for a number of reasons. Some of it is to provide aid. Others are relatives that are going to help, or people that are going to help their relatives. So people are traveling in this direction for a variety of reasons. We've also seen several ambulances that are going that way. Remember, this is a time when they need as many resources as possible, not just for the search and rescue element, but also to help those that may have been injured as a result of those earthquakes and those structural collapses that we saw there. And that is exactly what the Gift of the Givers team will be doing when we get there. The initial, the understanding was that the journey was just about 200 kilometers, but unfortunately, because of these delays, that journey has now increased in length. We should have been there already according to the maps, but it's possible that it could take as long as 5 hours before we eventually get to that point. And that's where there will be a meeting with the disaster management agencies, and that's when the team from South Africa will be deployed to assist. But they won't be alone. There are resources coming in from several other countries. I'm told that there are more than 5,000 teams that have offered assistance to Turkey during this time, in addition to their over 100,000 personnel from the various entities that are assisting to help rescue those that are trapped under the rubble as a result of those earthquakes.
Teaching has resumed at Gelukdal Secondary School in Brakpan after several days of protests following the killing of 18-year-old pupil Sona last week. Security has been tightened at the school, but parents remain on edge about the safety of their children. eNCA's Mangoba Mkunu reports.
A sense of calm seems to have returned to Gelukdal Secondary School. Pupils have finally returned to the classroom, but under strict security measures. This as security has now been beefed up at the school amid safety concerns.
I'm relieved so suddenly
very relieved. It must be an ongoing thing.
We want this to be an ongoing thing. It must not end up today. Understand? And this so-called this color thing and African thing, I don't entertain it.
But some parents are still worried about their children's safety.
Abantwana bethu beza ngeenyawo, so ngeke ngadibana nabo abanye bayajika njengomuntu otransporta abantwana, so ngabathatha ngathi mina ngicela ningene etransportini nihambeni nesikoleni because bathi babamele lapha esigangeni, so they are not safe abantwana bethu ukuza la esikolweni.
We want SAPS stationed here at the school because every day after school there's fights happening here.
Last week, schooling came to a standstill here at Gelukdal after the murder of 18-year-old Sona, who was stabbed to death following an altercation that started inside the school. But while some blame racism for the incident, others hold a completely different view.
It's gangsterism, not racist fights, gangsterism. Had those cops been stationed here at the school since the 19th of August, truly we believe that child would not have passed away.
But 3 kids in the school, office bakalang racism. So we cannot override the fact that there is racism in the school. I see some of the parents to go back to your schools, go back to the location. We cannot override that.
We're still going to be here for quite some time until the school stabilizes. We're not going to leave. So we'll be working with them. That's why we have so many stakeholder meetings, and we encourage that. Let's have meetings, let's discuss, let's agree, let's disagree for the future of our children.
The department will not be drawn on whether any disciplinary measures have been taken against the pupils involved in the altercation or whether they are back in class. For now, the main focus is to try and diffuse the tensions that gripped the area. Mangoba Mkunu, Brakpan.
The Tshwane University of Technology held a memorial service for Ntukozo Traba on Thursday. She was found dead in her residence room last week with stab wounds to her neck. Nebo Tusi, her ex-boyfriend, was arrested and charged with murder and remains in custody.
It's become a profound and widespread problem in South Africa. Gender-based violence remains a thorn in society. The latest incident to shock the nation is the brutal death of Tshwane University of Technology third-year student Ntokozo Traba. Traba was allegedly stabbed to death at a residence earlier this month by her ex-boyfriend. Students at this campus say women aren't safe.
I wouldn't lie, no one feels safer. If this can happen in a residence, I mean a campus is much more complex.
The Tshwane University of Technology Vice-Chancellor says there are already programs in place to fight gender-based violence.
9 out of 10 times the perpetrators are people known to the students. There are a few cases where strangers are involved, but most times it's people who are known to the students.
Some gender-based violence activist groups say accountability is needed. They wonder what happened to the promised 1.6 billion rand plan to combat gender-based violence.
You'll remember 2 years ago, he pledged over R1 billion towards the fight and the scourge of gender-based violence. We'd actually like an audit on that. What happened to that money? Where has it been used? Because it seems as though the fight against gender-based violence is getting tougher and tougher, and there seems to be no relief.
Meanwhile, Higher Education Minister Pladen Zimande has vowed to launch a gender-based violence awareness program following Traba's murder, a move the students hope will ensure their safety in society. Buleli Chiti-Jones in Pretoria.
And that ends this week's edition of Week in One. From myself and the team, have a safe weekend.